I'm fine, thank you.
Great. When did you get to Oregon?
I arrived in April of 1988.
And why did you choose Oregon?
I was offered a job up here in Oregon. I had been making wine down in the state of California, and I just saw that there was such great potential up here in Oregon that I wanted to be a part of a growing industry. And being a young woman, it just seemed like the perfect opportunity to come on up and make a difference.
Did you come by yourself?
No, actually my husband and I had just been married the week before, so I came by myself for the first couple of months, but I had just been married and then he joined me once the school year ended.
Are you happy that you chose Oregon?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think that when we were offered the position to come up here and make wine in Oregon, we looked at the fact that it was a growing industry. As a young woman, I could make a difference in the industry, but also the quality of life up here in Oregon. We're both very active in the outdoors, and Mount Hood is just an hour's drive away. The rivers are an hour's drive away. The ocean's an hour's drive away. It was very appealing, having been in California for so many years, both of us during our education and then working in the Napa Valley, that we looked at that and thought, what a great place to raise a family.
Now, what drew you to Pinot Noir?
I think the challenge of Pinot Noir, I had been making Cabernet, and for me, Pinot Noir is the great unknown. It's harder to make. I think when you make it well, it's incredible, but you can also make it and it's not so incredible, and that kind of draws a lot of people because it's the ultimate challenge in winemaking, in my opinion.
You've been very involved in the laws around Oregon wine. Can you speak to us? What are the labeling laws that you have?
Well, I wasn't directly involved in any of those. Those were actually started in 1977 by a lot of the founding fathers in Oregon. I think that coming from a different winemaking region to Oregon, you had to learn a lot about the labeling laws because they are different, and you learn why they are different and the reasons behind why they are different. And what it is that Oregon felt very strongly about creating an image that was true to the grape varietal and true to what we were trying to do. We weren't making red Burgundies, we were making Pinot Noir, we weren't making Chablis, we were making our own variety of grapes, and that's why the labeling laws were put into place so that you knew what you were getting as a consumer. We actually instituted laws that meant you had to put a varietal content of at least 90% in your wine. The federal law states only 75%. So, when you see Pinot Noir on a label of Oregon wine, it's at least 90% Pinot Noir.
Do you think that sets Oregon apart?
I think it sets Oregon apart. I think it also challenges us Oregon winemakers because you've really got to be true to your variety. You can't go and say, well, I don't have enough body in my Pinot Noir, I'll just slip a little Cabernet into it. So you really have to focus on what you're doing with Pinot Noir and what style you're trying to achieve, and that starts in the vineyard and works its way through. You can't just add something later.
Do you see other states imposing the same kind of labeling laws?
I haven't seen it yet. I think that it might eventually come down the road. It's kind of fun to watch how different states adapt what we think we've created here in Oregon. I was just reading in the newspaper something about fish-safe winemaking. Well, we've had salmon-safe winemaking here in Oregon for years. And so I think it is kind of nice to see that Oregon is setting the standards sometimes, the benchmarks that other states are looking at and thinking maybe we should try to achieve these benchmarks.
Okay.
I think it's also important to note about the different labeling laws that we have here in Oregon. It's varietal is 90%. Vintage has to be 95%, but place has to be 100%. The Oregon vintners felt very, very strongly about not taking the place names and using those as the name on their bottle, like Burgundy, it's a place, it's in France, it's not here in Oregon. And so we preferred to use Pinot Noir, which is the variety that is grown in Burgundy, obviously. And it went on. There were other champagne. We don't use the term champagne, we use sparkling wine. Johannesburg Riesling, we don't use that, we use white Riesling. It was important that we weren't stealing place names to name our wines. We named them the varietals in which was in the bottle. And so we started off with 5 or so appellations in the state of Oregon that we all made our wines from. And the wines from that region, like Willamette Valley, had to be 100% from the Willamette Valley. We've slowly realized that there are other appellations within this large Willamette Valley appellation, for instance, that we're starting to identify. But what I think is really fascinating about the Oregon vintners is that we didn't just jump right in and start naming our appellations immediately upon growing our grapes in those regions. We sat back and really tried to figure out, were these appellations different and did they make a difference to the consumer? And so it's taken time to really understand and fully develop the appellations. And so, as you may know, there's several appellations that are pending right now that become more specific rather than the large Willamette Valley, we're looking at appellations like the Eola Hills or the Ribbon Ridge. They're smaller appellations, and so they're more distinctive to the consumer.
You've seen, what are some of the marketing challenges that are facing Oregon winemakers today?
They're constantly changing. I think the first marketing challenge Oregon had many years ago when I first joined was, where's Oregon? It was ironic to be traveling around the United States, and a lot of people could not place the state of Oregon above California underneath Washington. I literally traveled with a map to say, here we are in Oregon. Then you start talking about Willamette Valley, and people can't really pronounce the word Willamette, and so it's uncomfortable for them as you're talking of your region that they didn't realize they've been mispronouncing that word for years. So those are the challenges, is getting Oregon on the map, getting people to identify where our grapes are being grown in the state of Oregon. Now the challenges are a little bit different in the instance we're out there. Pinot Noir is finally becoming a name. It's a varietal people recognize, people will ask for on a restaurant list or in a retail store. But getting people to understand the nuances of Pinot and how special Pinot Noir is, and be willing to take that glass of wine or that bottle off the shelf and take it home. And it's just about education. I think all of us feel as we go out in the marketplace, the more consumers you get to at least try a glass of Pinot Noir, the more consumers you bring into the fold. So all of us are out hitting the markets right now, pouring our Pinot Noir.
You've been here 16 years.
Correct.
And so you're sort of in the mid-range of
Second generation.
So, but you must have seen a lot of changes. Can you speak to any of them?
Oh, they've been incredible changes. The first thing that always kind of strikes me is that when I started here, there were 56 wineries in the state of Oregon, and now there's well over 250 wineries, and that's in a 16-year period only. The big changes that I have seen, it's in the vineyards. When I first got here, I don't think we were all really focused on the vineyards as much as we were focused on the winemaking. And we've come to realize that the vineyards are really the primary starting point, and you have to put your energy and focus on those vineyards. So crop loads have changed dramatically. When I first got here, people were trying to see 3.5 tons to the acre, and now we're really focused on what's the best crop load for each individual vineyard site. In some sites it might be 3, but a lot of sites it's 2. But really learning from your vineyards what they need to do. Canopy management's another huge issue. We used to go in and just strip all the leaves off of our canopies because we felt like we need, I should say all the leaves, but around the fruiting zone, because we felt we needed to get exposure for airflow and get that fruit as exposed to the sun and air as we possibly could. And now I think we're all backing off that and realizing those leaves are valuable to that cluster there. So we want to really allow that cluster to have some leaf area around it. And these are all ideas that have evolved and changed. We've made wines, we've tasted wines together as a collective, we've gone over to each other's wineries and tasted and said, what'd you do, how's this different? And you know, that's what's fascinating about the Oregon industry. To me as a young person, 16 years ago, how willing people were to share with you, and you could ask questions, and we continue to ask questions and experiment and try to figure out what do we want to do here. Nobody has the answers, and that's exciting. I think that as Oregon has developed, we've begun to see that there's a taste of different vineyard sites, and it all relates to the soils that they're planted in. And it can be somewhat of a discussion point for different winemakers. Some feel very strongly that there is a taste of the place, and that they oftentimes will vineyard designate their wines because they feel that this wine speaks of that vineyard and the place that that vineyard is in. And there's others that feel that the Pinot Noir is part of the picture and that you need to paint a picture. And so you like to use vineyard sites that are located in different areas. I kind of sit in the middle of the fence, that I love the taste of different vineyard sites, and I really focus on those vineyard sites. But I feel they're mature sites that have spent time in the soil, bringing forth the taste of the soils. And in younger sites, they haven't had their opportunity to fully mature and bring forth the taste of the soil. And I'll take those sites and paint a picture. I'll blend those sites to create another wine.
Family. There are first and second generation wineries like Ponzi's and Campbell's, etc. And so those are baton passes from one generation to another, which are happening now. But you, as far as your own experience is concerned, you've got growth of family participation in your wine. How about talking about that a little bit? You've got young children, so you aren't passing the baton,
right.
But you've shifted as far as your own career is concerned.
Right. In Oregon, there's various families in the winemaking industry that have been here for many, many years. They're the founding families in the Oregon industry, the Eras and the Ponzis, David Lett. And it's currently taking place is that we're seeing a passing of the baton, and so it's a second generation of the same family taking on the winemaking. Well, there's kind of a bridge group, that in-between group or age group, and that's where I find myself placed along with people like Laurent Montelou from originally Willa Kinsey, now he's at Salina, Joe Dobbs. We're people who came to Oregon. Steve Dorner at Christum is another I think of. We came to Oregon as hired winemakers. A lot of us were down in California making wine. We were hired to come to Oregon to make wine. We joined the Oregon wine community as these in-betweeners. We didn't have family who had wineries, but we were hired to make wine for someone else. And in the last 5 years, it's been very interesting. We've seen this radical transformation where we've all taken off now and have started our own facilities and are beginning our own little wineries. Myself, my husband and I and our partners have started our own little winery. We're building wineries. We've set our roots very deep in the Oregon wine community. Now, my kids are very, very young. They're 9 and 12. Who knows? Maybe they'll take the baton from me when the time comes. But for me, it was a career, and now it's become a life here in the Oregon wine industry.
Beautifully said.
I think one of the things about the Oregon industry that I've enjoyed and have been a big part of is the collaborative winemaking, vineyard experimentation that takes place. And one experiment that comes to mind is an experiment that I worked on with Harry and Terry Castile, Harry Peterson Nedry and Terry Castile, is we created a terroir experiment where the three of us chose an important vineyard site to us. We gave each other a ton of that fruit, and we made wine from that fruit. And then we let everybody and anybody taste that wine and give us their thoughts. And what we were asking them was, could you see the hand or the land in this experiment? Was it the vineyard that was influencing the wine, or was it the winemaker that was influencing the wine? And it was a phenomenal experiment. 50% of the people guessed vineyard, 50% guessed it was the winemaker. And it was consistent only in that it was a 50-50 division across the board. That was a great experiment to show people. Well, sometimes they feel very strongly about it's the winemaker, and not necessarily so. But that experiment was tenfold for me because it allowed me to talk very openly with my peers and people I admire about, well, why'd you do this? Why'd you use enzyme? Why didn't you use this? You know, how hot did you get your ferments? And it really opened up a lot of winemaking to each of us. And we enjoyed it so much, we've continued to do that for another 3 years. And we culminated deciding we need to give each other our worst vineyard and see what you can do with it. And it was great. It was so educational. It taught us so much about each other and our winemaking. It made us question our winemaking techniques and why we do what we do. And so I think all of us found it extremely valuable. And that continues all over Oregon. There's all types of collaborative winemaking and vineyard experiments going on where we constantly ask each other a question and then set forth to try to prove it or disprove that question.